Hey guys, it's Spooky Boots here, and today I'm going to show you guys how to transfer a laser print image onto a piece of wood. I'm using my skate rail. The last video I made, I did 200 tricks for 200 subscribers, and I was noticing my box has so much potential. I could do a lot with it. I could paint it, or put some stickers on it, or transfer something to it. So today I'm going to practice transferring an image onto my P-rail, and if it comes out successfully, I'm gonna transfer. I have multiple prints here. I'm gonna do the rest on my box. Stick around if that's what you guys wanna see. All right guys, so I have moved down to my basement for this project. It's a little hot outside. It's also smoky from all the fires still going on. So I'm gonna work in the comfort of AC. For this project, what you'll need is you'll need Mod Podge. It doesn't matter what finish you get, just any kind of Mod Podge. I've seen people use glossy, matte, dishwasher safe. I don't think it really matters. As long as it's Mod Podge, it'll transfer the image. Second, you'll need some sort of foam brush. I got a 2-inch brush here because it works better with the size of my graphic here. So 2-inch for me, but depending on how large or small your graphic is, you might want wider, you might want something a little more narrow. It just depends on your image. Scissors or box cutter or X-Acto. I have a lot of negative space on this print that I'm gonna cut off. If your print is full bleed, then you don't need to cut your image, so you don't have to worry about it. Next, this is nice to have, and I think it makes all the difference when it comes to these kind of transfers. So I've seen people use credit cards and debit cards or whatever, you know, just a kind of library card or something, but I think it'll turn out a lot better, your print will, if you use a roller of some kind. So basically what this is for is once you apply the Mod Podge to your graphic and then you flip it over, you'll need to roll it down, roll out the air bubbles, and this works a lot better than only having like a card to do it. I use both because I think it makes for, this is initially good to use at first, and then you can go in with the fine little bumps with the credit card and then roll it out again. It's just a technique that I think works better, so I just use both. You may or may not want to sand your surface, so I have a little bit of sandpaper here. This is actually a pretty nice smooth surface, but it does have a little bit of bumpies and little catches, so I'm just gonna polish it up a little bit with some sandpaper. That way my print transfers a little more evenly. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get started on the transfer. With your image, guys, I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the video, but this is a new logo I've designed, and basically what you want to do is you want to use a laser printer image. I don't think inkjet works, but I'm not 100% sure. But you basically just want a really thin piece of paper, like printer paper, and then you also want it to be laser printed. Also, another thing is my logo here is backwards, so I printed it backwards so that way when it transfers, it'll show up right the way it's supposed to. So flip your image and also get it printed on thin printer paper, laser printed. I'm gonna start off with a more rough surface or more rough sandpaper, and then I'm gonna move down to probably something a little finer. Again, this isn't 100% necessary for your project, it just depends, but I'm going to do this just because, you know, this has been kicked around and it's been outside, and I could definitely get a better surface out of this, so I'm gonna sand it down a little bit and then transfer the image. Alright, and I'm satisfied with that. It feels a lot smoother, so I think I'll get a better transfer now that this is a little smoother. Now we need our Mod Podge. The reason why I went with matte is because I feel like if I put something high gloss on here, it will look weird. So what you do when you do the transfer is you use the Mod Podge to transfer the image, and then you go back over it with the Mod Podge to basically coat it. So I went with a matte just because the surface is kind of matte and dull, so I felt like if I had one image here with like a glossy covering, it would kind of stand out a little more than I'd like it to. That's why I went with the matte, but whatever your project is, you know, you just have to make the best judgment. I don't really have anything to pour this into, and I think my brush is a little too wide to dip in here, so I'm just going to use the lid here. If you guys are trying to plan ahead and have a smooth process, you want something that your brush is able to dip in and not be too messy or too small or anything like that. You want to apply this relatively thickly, I guess is the word. Just give it a heavy coating. Don't be skimpy with it. You definitely want enough to really seep into the image, lifting the ink, so that way you get a nice transfer. Alright, so I think that is enough. Now I'm going to flip this over and apply it to my wood surface. All right, this is where the roller really helps with applying the paper to the surface. I'm gonna go in with the credit card and very gently just get out all these smaller little bubbles. You definitely want to be careful with the credit card. It has sharp edges, so you know, once this paper gets saturated with the Mod Podge, there's potentially, you know, you could potentially go through it with the edge of the card, so definitely just be a little careful. I find that the card helps with really pressing out the small little air bubbles that the roller doesn't always sometimes get. And then I go back in with the roller just to be safe. If you do have a roller and you are using this technique, guys, I would always recommend starting at the center of your image and going out in every direction. So I feel like some people do this, and that's really not the way you want to do it. You really want to start in the center of your image and roll outward for the best possible transfer, and also I think it helps prevent it from slipping around. Once you have the image down, this is kind of the hardest part for me, is just waiting. I think at minimum you have to wait at least 8 hours. So I am applying this at 3:33 p.m. on Sunday. I don't know, I may or may not come back to it tonight. I definitely could if I wanted to. I might just let it sit overnight. I'm not really sure yet, but at least give it that 8 hours to really set and transfer the pigment before you come back to lift it. So we're gonna let that sit and we'll come back to this. All right guys, so I am back. It is the next day. So this is sat for most of the night last night, all through the day today. So we are going to lift this paper and hopefully our image has stuck to the wood. What you'll need is a washcloth or a towel or whatever size appropriate piece of wet cloth, and just go ahead and press that onto your image. You want your towel, like, I don't know, I would say a little more than damp, but definitely not soaked. I don't know if that makes any sense to people, but I actually could probably get some more water on here. So I'm gonna do that real quick. I think I wrung this out a little too hard. But basically you want a wet towel or a wet cloth to basically place on the image and let it sit 10 to 15 minutes. Just let it really get nice and soaked, I guess. All right, so I got a little bit more water on my cloth here, so I'm gonna press that in a little bit. I don't know how necessary it is to like stay here and like press it into the image. I think you can get away with just letting a wet towel sit on it for 15 minutes, but I'm just gonna kind of speed this up a little bit, just get the paper wet a little more quickly. All right guys, so I think this has sat for long enough. You can kind of check when you peel away the cloth, you can look at the paper and see what parts still need to soak a little longer. For the most part, this is, I think, ready to come up. So I've seen some people do a rubbing technique with their cloth. They'll like put their cloth on their thumb and like rub away the paper. I'm gonna start with that technique. I've done this, like I said, I've done this once before, and I started tearing up the image doing that. So I'm kind of curious to see if I can just kind of peel it away like this and maybe get away with it, or just kind of like rub it with my finger. So I'm being very gentle with this. You're just going to keep rubbing away at your image. This is going to take a little while depending on how big your image is, but it looks like it's transferred to the wood, so we'll find out here when I'm all done, but I don't want to get too confident and then like me mess it up. I'm doing little circular motions, but I don't think it really matters. You could probably do straight line kind of. I think the circular helps. I'm just kind of following the shape of my image here. So for the wheels, I'm kind of doing little circles. Every once in a while I am kind of wringing this out just to get a little bit more water on there. I don't know how necessary it is, but I'm worried about the paper drying and then me starting to rub harder, and then I start taking up the graphic. So I think, you know, if the paper is saturated, that's fine. I don't think it really changes anything. This is definitely turning out a lot better than my last attempt. So I did, like I said, this is my second time doing this. I did one before I started filming, and then this is my second attempt after I learned all my little mistakes. This is definitely turning out a lot better than my first one. I think the first one I was just a little too impatient and I didn't wait long enough with the print transfer, and then I also didn't wait long enough to saturate the paper to start rubbing away at it. I think you just got to be patient with this kind of stuff, guys. Definitely helps. I think this is the only spot that's peeled up so far. There's a little nick. I don't even know if you can even see it on the camera, but I think I'm going to hit that with a Sharpie, and other than that, it's coming out really nicely. I'm going in with my finger and heavily scraping away at the negative space here, and then when it comes to the illustration itself, I'm just gently rubbing my finger over because I've noticed that the washcloth did start to take little chunks of black out. So I think what I'm going to do is let this dry, come back and soak it again, and then work at it again. I think what's happening is I'm just running out of water with my washcloth here, and everything's drying up, so then I'm having to scrape harder and it's tearing up the image. So I'm going to let this dry completely. I'm going to come back in, re-soak it, and then start the same process again, and hopefully that will not tear up the image, and I'll still be able to get most of this white out of here. So I am back. This is completely dry. You can see where I did and did not remove the paper. Once it dried, it's a little more visible. So I'm gonna re-soak this. I brought a toothbrush, so it's gonna be a test. I don't know how effective it will be for removing the paper. I'm gonna give a little scrub with the toothbrush and see if it removes the paper and doesn't remove the image. I feel like my fingers are doing the best job. The toothbrush was helping for a little bit, but definitely I think this kind of process requires a lot of going in with the detail. I think if you were doing something like a photograph, you might be able to get away with a little more imperfections. I heard that's kind of part of the transfer process is, expect imperfections, but with a graphic image like this, like a logo, it's just black. I think what I'm going to do is after this dries again, I'm going to see what's left, hit it one more time with, a little bit of water and rubbing, and then I'm going to Sharpie in the spots that got chipped away, and then I think what I'm going to do is just give it that clear coat, and I think the clear coat will hide the rest of this white that I think it's just residue leftover Mod Podge. So I'm going to let this dry again and see how it looks in a couple minutes here. So I kind of discovered a technique that was working a little better. So as it dries, it almost seems like whatever the pigment that comes out of the paper sticks to the wood, you're able to rub at the graphic a little more and the paper comes up. So I don't know how to describe it, but basically the more dry it gets with the paper being a little moist, basically what I've been doing is just dipping my finger in some water and rubbing, and it's been getting rid of the paper and not the graphic. So I'm just gonna lightly keep rubbing this until all this paper is gone. So this was definitely a little bit of trial and error. I've definitely learned a few things doing this. I don't mind this process, but it's definitely a little more involved than what I thought it would be. I was thinking about doing a stencil and spray paint. I just didn't want to, I don't know, for some reason I was thinking about it more and more, and I just didn't want to carve out a stencil. Also, I would be losing this detail work in the ghost figure here. I mean, I'm losing it doing this, I will admit. Like, I have to go in and clean it up, but I don't think I'm not really great at making stencils, so I feel like it wouldn't turn out as well as what this did. This is almost like a printed graphic. Okay, I think that's as good as it's gonna get before I clear coat it. So I'm gonna let this dry a little bit more. I'm gonna Sharpie in the missing spots and then clear coat it. So here is the final, well, not final, but this is after I did a little bit of detail, rubbing away at some of the remaining stubborn little paper particles. And I have gone in with the Sharpie and touched up some spots. So the Sharpie is a little more glossy than the transfer, but I'm thinking once I put the Mod Podge on, you won't even be able to tell where the Sharpie spots are. Sorry, I noticed a little bit of a rough spot. Alright guys, so this is ready to go for the coating with the Mod Podge. So I'm gonna take my foam brush, which I think I left upstairs, so I'll have to go grab that. Okay, so I'm back. I got my foam brush. Let's give this thing a coating of Mod Podge, and that will hopefully, I think it will seal it and just kind of protect it, and hopefully it'll hide these kind of glossy parts where I went in with the Sharpie. I think if I zoom in here, you might be able to tell. Yeah, so there's like one there, one there, one there. I think it'll kind of hide all that once we get this coating on here. So that is the finished product. That was with the Sharpie touch-ups and then the clear coat of Mod Podge over the whole surface. So if you guys have any questions or comments on the process, or just maybe some tips or something, anything, if you guys have any questions, I can definitely try to help in the comment section. If you guys like the video, go ahead and give it a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. This isn't my normal type of content. I do mostly skating, but I thought this little wood transfer project would be pretty fun to show you guys. It's kind of late right now, but I actually think I'm gonna get a few shots of it outside. I'm gonna session this thing, get a couple of tricks on it, and then call it a night.